Stop for a moment and picture a shop window. Not just any shop, the most expensive street in the city. The kind of street where the doors are heavy glass and a guard stands just inside. And in that window, one name, in gold. You've seen it 1,000 times. On a handbag people wait months and pay a fortune for. On a pair of soft leather loafers with a little gold horsebit across the front. On a silk scarf. On sunglasses. On the luggage of the rich. In the lobbies of the finest hotels on earth. 2 letters back to back. G and G. Locked together like 2 hands holding on. You already know the name. Everybody does. Gucci. One family, one name. Born in a tiny leather shop in Florence, Italy, more than 100 years ago. And it grew into one of the most glamorous names the world has ever known. Now here is the strange, dark thing about that name. That same family, the family that built all this beauty, tore itself apart so completely that today, not one of them owns any part of it. Not a single share, not one gold letter. And their story does not end with a handshake or a quiet goodbye. It ends with a man lying dead on a street in Milan, shot on his way to work, and his own ex-wife sent to prison for ordering it. So how does that happen? How does a family build something the whole world adores and then destroy each other over it until there is nothing of the family left inside the empire at all? How do you go from a proud father and his sons to that same father in a prison cell, put there by his own son, to a murder on a quiet morning? This is World's Richest, and this is the most famous family war on earth. So stay with me, because this one has everything: beauty, money, betrayal, and blood. We have told stories on this channel about great families who fought and somehow stayed whole. Families who divided the empire but kept the peace, and kept the name in the family for another 100 years. This is the opposite of those stories. This is what happens when a family has everything, except the one thing that actually holds a family together. To understand how it fell, you have to see how high it climbed. So let's go back, all the way back to the beginning. The year is 1921. The city is Florence, and a man named Guccio opens a small shop selling fine leather goods, bags, luggage, and gear for people who ride horses. But to really understand Guccio, you have to go back even further, because years before that shop, as a young man, Guccio had left Italy and gone to London, and there he took a job at one of the grandest hotels in the world, the Savoy. He was not a guest. He carried the guests' bags. He was the young man who hauled the beautiful luggage of the rich up to their rooms and watched them come and go. And something about that world got into him. The elegance of it, the gorgeous suitcases and traveling trunks, the way the wealthy moved through the world and the beautiful things they carried, and the refined English style of horse riding, all fine leather and polished metal buckles. Here was a poor young man hauling other people's beautiful things up a staircase, and quietly, stubbornly, dreaming of making his own. He watched, he learned, he noticed which bags the richest guests carried and why. And when he finally went home to Florence, he took all of that with him. That dream became the shop. And Guccio turned out to have a real gift, not just for making things, but for making people want them. Let me tell you 2 small stories that show you the kind of cleverness this family started with. In the 1930s, Italy fell under harsh international penalties, and good leather became hard to get. A lesser company would have simply made less. Guccio did the opposite. He took a humble, cheap cloth, woven hemp, and printed it with a small diamond pattern, and made beautiful bags out of it anyway. He turned a shortage into a signature. Then, after the Second World War, materials were short again. And so, in 1947, Gucci made a handbag with a handle of bamboo, real bamboo, heated over a flame and bent into a curve. It was again a clever answer to having nothing, and it became one of the most famous bags in the world. Years later, it would be carried by Princess Diana. By Elizabeth Taylor. A bag born out of having no leather became a treasure that royalty carried. That was the family's gift, right from the start. They could take almost nothing, a scrap of cloth, a stick of bamboo, and turn it into something the whole world suddenly, desperately wanted. It is a rare kind of magic, and it makes what happened later all the more heartbreaking, because a family that could turn nothing into gold would one day turn all their gold into nothing. And then there was the little horse. Remember, Guccio fell in love with the world of English horse riding, so Gucci took the snaffle bit, the small metal piece from a horse's bridle, and made it the mark of the brand, a gleaming gold horse bit across the front of a loafer, in 1953, on a handbag in 1955. To this day, if you see that little metal bit on a shoe, you think of one name. And of course, those two letters, the interlocking double G. They were simply Guccio's own initials. His first name and his last, both beginning with G, turned into the most recognized symbol in fashion. And the famous faces kept coming. There is a lovely story about a silk scarf covered in flowers, the Flora scarf, that the family created for one of the most beautiful film stars in the world, Grace Kelly, who by then had become a princess. That is the world Gucci moved in now. Not shopkeepers and travelers, but princesses and movie stars. There was one more thing that lifted Gucci from famous to legendary. A soft, simple shoulder bag. An American woman carried it, again and again, everywhere she went. And that woman was Jacqueline Kennedy, the wife of the American president, one of the most photographed women alive. She loved that bag so much and was seen with it so often that the world simply started calling it the Jackie. Imagine that. Your handbag becomes so famous it takes on the name of a first lady. That was the altitude Gucci was flying at now. Think about what had happened. A boy who once carried suitcases for rich strangers at a London hotel now made the suitcases that the most glamorous people alive wanted to be seen with. By the 1950s and 60s, Gucci was not just an Italian shop anymore. It was global. There was a store on Fifth Avenue in New York, one of the last great milestones Guccio saw, opening right around the time his own life was ending, in early 1953. And it only climbed from there. Through the 1970s and 80s, gleaming Gucci boutiques opened in the great cities of the world: London, Paris, Tokyo, Beverly Hills. The double G monogram became a kind of secret handshake among the rich. To own a piece of Gucci was to announce, without a word, that you had arrived. A little leather shop in Florence had become a global symbol of success itself. Because in 1953, Guccio Gucci died, and he left his beautiful growing house to his three sons. Now, pay attention to these three men, because the whole tragedy grows out of them. The eldest was Aldo. Aldo was the ambitious one, the builder. He was the one who took Gucci to America and made it a global name, and he is the one usually credited with turning his father's initials into that double G logo. If Guccio planted the seed, Aldo grew the tree across the world. The second son was Vasco, quieter, who looked after the making of the products. And the third son was Rodolfo, and Rodolfo had lived a whole other life before all this. Before he ever joined the family firm, he had been a movie actor, a real one, appearing in dozens of Italian films, under a stage name, back in the 1930s and 40s. He knew the world of glamour from the inside, and one day, his only son would inherit his share of everything. 3 brothers, 1 house. Aldo out front, building the empire across the world. And, for a while, it truly worked. The name got bigger and bigger, the money flowed, and the Guccis became Italian royalty of a kind. Not born to it, but earning it, bag by beautiful bag. And for a while, they were family. But then came the crack, the small, quiet imbalance that would one day split the family in two. In 1974, the middle brother, Vasco, died, and he had no children, so his share of the company was divided between the 2 brothers left standing, half to Aldo, half to Rodolfo, 50-50. 2 brothers, 2 branches, perfectly balanced. But grasp this, because it matters more than anything else in the whole story. On Aldo's side, there were 3 sons, all grown, all wanting a real place in the business. On Rodolfo's side, there was just 1 son, 1 heir. And Aldo did something that seemed generous at the time, but quietly loaded the gun. He gave each of his 3 sons a small slice of his own half, just a few % each, while keeping the biggest piece for himself. So on his side, 4 people now shared 1/2 of the company, none of them fully happy, each watching the others. Meanwhile, on the other side, 1 young man stood to one day inherit an entire 50% of Gucci, all of it, all at once, in one clean, unbroken piece. So picture the 2 halves. One is a father and 3 restless sons, all crowded around the same slice, all wanting more. The other is a father and a single boy, who will one day hold more of Gucci than anyone else alive. That is the imbalance. That is the crack in the glass. And now watch it spread. Let me introduce the next generation, the cousins who would finish what that crack started. On Aldo's side, the 3 sons, Giorgio, Roberto, and, the one who matters most, Paolo. And on Rodolfo's side, the single heir, a young man named Maurizio. Paolo and Maurizio, 2 cousins, 2 grandsons of old Guccio, and between them, they would burn the whole thing down. Let's start with Paolo. Paolo was a designer, and a restless, frustrated one. He had ideas, big ones, and he felt his family would never give him the room or the respect to use them. He wanted to be more than one of Aldo's 3 sons. He wanted his own name to mean something. So in 1980, Paolo did something the rest of the family saw as pure betrayal. Quietly, without telling his father or his uncle, he started his own separate line of products, using the Gucci name, his family's name, to sell them. When Aldo and Rodolfo found out, they were furious. Their own boy, cashing in on the family name behind their backs, cheapening the very thing they had spent their lives building. They threw him out of the company. His own father, Aldo, took him to court and threatened to cut off anyone who dared supply him. And this is where a business quarrel started curdling into something uglier, something personal, something that would not heal. In 1982, at a family board meeting, it turned physical. Paolo announced he was going to record the meeting on tape. Tempers exploded. A struggle broke out right there in the boardroom among fathers and sons and uncles and cousins, and Paolo walked away from a meeting of his own family with cuts on his face. He then turned around and sued them for $2 million, his own family, bleeding in a boardroom and then in a courtroom over a tape recorder. This was no longer a company having a disagreement. This was a family coming apart at the seams. But Paolo was not finished. Not even close, because his next move is the one nobody in that family could ever take back. Paolo wanted his father, Aldo, out of the way, so he teamed up with his cousin, Maurizio, to strip Aldo of his control of the company, and then Paolo did the unthinkable. He reported his own father to the tax authorities in America, and it worked. In 1986, Aldo Gucci, the man who had built Gucci in America with his own hands, the man who had made the family a fortune in a whole new country, now an old man of 81, stood in a United States court, and he pleaded guilty to hiding around $7 million from the American taxman. He was sentenced to a year and a day behind bars, and so Aldo Gucci, in his 80s, one of the great names of Italian luxury, walked into an American prison. Sit with that for a second. There was no army, no hostile takeover, no stranger, no rival, no enemy brought this proud old man down. It was his son, a grudge nursed too long, and a quiet phone call to the tax office. That is the moment this stopped being a business feud and became a family tragedy. A father, in a prison cell, in a foreign country, in the last years of his life, put there by his own child. Whatever was left of the family after that was never going to be whole again. Now, while all of that was tearing apart Aldo's side of the family, The other cousin had been quietly rising, Maurizio. Remember, Maurizio was Rodolfo's only son, and in 1983, Rodolfo died. And just like that, Maurizio inherited his father's entire half of the company, the full 50%, all in one piece, all to himself. That made Maurizio the single most powerful person in the family, the biggest owner of them all, and he used that power without mercy. He set out to take total control of the company. It was a long, bruising battle, fought over several years through boardrooms and courtrooms with cousins and uncles as his enemies. He pushed his uncle Aldo, already wounded by his own son, already heading for an American prison, out of the chairman's seat. And step by step, he beat back everyone who stood in his way. By 1989, it was done. Maurizio Gucci, the founder's grandson, sat at the very top of the whole empire, chairman of it all. And by then, the old builder was gone. Aldo Gucci, the man who had carried the family name across the ocean and made it a giant, only to be jailed and cast out by his own blood, died in 1990. He never saw what came next, because for one shining moment, it looked like the war was finally over. It looked like one man, Maurizio, had won everything. He had not. He was about to lose all of it. Because Maurizio, it turned out, was a dreamer, not a manager. He loved the idea of Gucci, the beauty, the heritage, the pure luxury of it. He had grand visions, lavish new headquarters, gorgeous, expensive offices in Florence and Milan. He wanted to restore the name to its old glory, and he spent and spent and spent to do it. But visions cost money, and a beautiful office does not sell a single handbag. Under Maurizio, the money going out began to dwarf the money coming in. By the early 1990s, Gucci, this world-famous, century-old name, was deep in the red, bleeding cash, in real danger of going under completely. And so, one by one, the family did the final, fatal thing. They sold. Paolo had already sold his slice of the company to an outside investment firm based in Bahrain called InvestCorp for around $42 million, the family name passing into the hands of strangers. And then, in 1993, Maurizio, drowning in losses, out of options, sold too. He sold his entire stake, roughly half of the whole company, to those same outside investors, for a reported $170 million. And with that single signature, something ended that had lasted more than 70 years. Because in 1993, for the first time since old Guccio opened his little shop in Florence, not one single member of the Gucci family owned any part of Gucci. Read that again slowly. The name lived on. The shops stayed open. The bags kept selling in every great city on earth. But the family, the Guccis themselves, the blood of old Guccio, were completely, totally out, locked out of their own name forever. Think of the sheer waste of it. For 70 years they had built this. Guccio and his shop, Aldo and his American empire, a name that meant beauty to the entire world. And they had fought each other so viciously, sued each other so bitterly, betrayed each other so deeply, a son informing on his father, a cousin against a cousin, that in the end they lost the very thing they had all been fighting over. Every last piece of it, handed to strangers for cash because they could not stand to share it with each other. They didn't lose Gucci to a rival or to bad luck or to a changing world. They lost it to their own inability to get along. You would think that would be the end of the tragedy, a proud family with nothing left but its name on someone else's building. It was not the end, because the darkest chapter had not happened yet. I want to slow down here and tell this part carefully and plainly, because it is real, and a real person died. On the morning of the 27th of March, 1995, Maurizio Gucci walked toward the entrance of his office in Milan. It was around 8:30 in the morning, an ordinary day. A man was waiting for him near the steps. And there, on a quiet Milan street, on an ordinary Monday morning, Maurizio Gucci was shot and killed. A doorman nearby was wounded too. and then the gunman simply walked away and vanished into the city. Maurizio was 46 years old, the grandson of the founder, the man who had, for one brief, dizzy moment, held the entire empire in his hands, and then lost every last piece of it, was gone, murdered in the elegant northern city where his family had become legends. And for 2 long years it was a complete mystery. No one knew who had done it, or why. A famous man gunned down in broad daylight, and no answer. The case went cold. And then, 2 years later, the police made an arrest that stopped the world cold. The person a court would later find had ordered Maurizio's killing was his own former wife, Patrizia Reggiani. The Italian newspapers gave her a chilling nickname, La Vedova Nera, the Black Widow. In 1998, a court convicted her of arranging the murder of her ex-husband. The court found that she had not pulled the trigger herself. Instead, working through a friend of hers, a woman who told fortunes, she had reached a hired gunman, and that gunman had done the killing. Several people were convicted for their parts in it, the woman in the middle, the man who fired the shots, and others who helped. Patrizia was sentenced to 29 years, later reduced to 26. She served about 18 of them and was released around 2016. Those are the facts a court established, and I am going to leave them exactly there. Why she did it, what was in her heart, what happened between 2 people whose marriage had fallen apart, that is not for me to guess at. The courts found what they found. I'll give you that. And not one word more. And one honest note before we go on. You may have seen a big Hollywood film about all of this. I gently say, treat it as a movie, not as history. A great deal of it was dramatized, and members of the real Gucci family were deeply hurt by it and said it got much of them wrong. So everything I've told you comes from the record, the courts, the history books, and not from the screen. Now, here is the final twist, and it might be the cruelest one of all. Because after the family was gone, after the feuds, the prison, the murder, Gucci itself did not die. It was reborn. The outside owners, who now held the whole company, brought in fresh talent. A young American designer named Tom Ford, with a bold, sexy, modern eye, and a sharp businessman to run things, named Domenico De Sole. And through the 1990s, those 2 men did something extraordinary. They took this tired, scandal-soaked old house, a business that had been within a whisker of going bankrupt, and they made it dazzling again. Ford's designs put Gucci back on every runway and every red carpet. The money came roaring back. In just a few years, the company went from making a couple of $100 million a year to more than $3 billion. It sold shares to the public. A brand that had nearly died was suddenly one of the hottest, richest names in all of fashion once more. And here is the thing to sit with. That great rebirth, the return of Gucci to the top of the world, happened after the last Gucci had already been pushed out of it. The family missed their own comeback. They were gone before the best chapter began. In fact, Gucci became so valuable that the 2 great titans of French luxury went to war over it. On one side, a giant empire, the Louis Vuitton Group, run by a billionaire named Bernard Arnault. If you've watched our other stories, you know that name. Arnault started quietly buying up Gucci shares, moving to swallow it whole. But this time, Gucci fought back. And to fight off Arnault, it turned to his single greatest rival, another French tycoon, named François Pinault. What followed was one of the fiercest boardroom battles in the history of fashion. 2 of the richest men in France going to war over a name a murdered man's family had thrown away. Pinault won. His group took control of Gucci, and today that group is called Kering. It is one of the biggest luxury empires on the planet, and Gucci is the shining jewel in its crown, worth many billions of dollars. 2 French billionaires fighting like lions over Gucci, and not one person named Gucci anywhere in the room. Which leaves us with the bitterest fact of the entire story. The family that dreamed up Gucci, and built Gucci, and then tore itself to shreds over Gucci, does not own a thread of it, not one share. Not one gold letter. The name is worth a fortune beyond counting, for other people with other names. So let's go back one last time to where we started, to that shop window on the most expensive street in the city, the gold name, the two letters back to back, G and G. They were only ever Gucci's initials, from a little leather shop in Florence 100 years ago, and it is still, even now, one of the most beautiful and desired names on the whole planet. People still line up for it, still save for it, still dream of it. But look, really look, at those two letters locked together, two G's holding onto each other like two hands that will not let go. Because that, in the end, is the one thing this family forgot. They had everything, a name the entire world adored, more money than they could ever spend, a business that other families could only dream of building, talent, beauty, fame, fortune, all of it in their hands. And they threw it all into the fire, one grudge at a time, a secret betrayal here, a lawsuit there, a son turning on his father, a cousin against a cousin, each one small at first, each one forgivable, maybe, on its own, but they never forgave. They only added fuel until there was nothing left to burn, because they could not do the single most important thing a family can do. The simplest thing, the hardest thing, hold on to each other. A father sent to prison by his own son, a cousin who won the whole empire and then lost every inch of it, a man shot dead on a Milan street on an ordinary morning, and a beautiful golden name, two hands holding on, that no longer belongs to a single living Gucci. They built one of the greatest names in the history of the world, and they could not, in the end, keep the one thing that was truly theirs. We'll see you with another one very soon.